meditation, which is what we were doing, or what we call the technique that we were all doing here, sitting still, looking at the wall, looking at the floor, and not doing much of anything at all. Meditation, everyone knows that word. There's hardly a person that hasn't heard of the word meditation. And of course, most people think they know what it is. They think it's, they may think that it's about calming down, relaxing, resting, and so on. And to some extent that's true. It is about doing that. It's about slowing down, holding still, just being here, and calming yourself down, so to speak. So there's something to that. But the approach that's being taken here, as the Buddha over 2,500 years and many Buddhists down through the centuries are taking, and we're endeavoring to take here, is to just observe and see what the mind actually is, what it's actually doing, without adding to it. Isn't it interesting? You know, in our daily life, we're in the grocery store, or we're going to do some kind of shopping, or we're in the doctor's office, or we're taking a break at work with some friends, and we're always adding, subtracting, dividing. We're doing all kinds of math. We're judging, we're evaluating, you know, it's not that this is incorrect or wrong, of course. If we're having a conversation with someone and they're discussing a particular topic, we might do some evaluating as far as how much sense that makes, what they're saying, or how much sense it makes what we're saying, for that matter. So there is something to be said for some evaluation, some kind of thinking, or discursive thought, as it's sometimes called. So we're not trying to stop that. We're not trying to quiet the mind down so it can't do anything. The two main words to remember here is observe. This is the technique. Just observe, in a nutshell. And you might say the goal, the initial goal, the provisional goal, the immediate goal is awareness, not trying to get into a better feeling, a better state of mind. And why? Because anything you create is going to come apart. So any kind of state of mind you're creating by using the technique of meditation, it can't last, because it's compounded, it's brought together by various elements, thoughts and ideas and opinions, holding still, controlling the mind. We don't even know what the mind is, yet we're always trying to control it. In fact, it's commonly accepted in our culture, isn't it? You need to control yourself. You should control your temper. You should control, you should control. So everyone kind of agrees. No one comes up and says something as outrageous as, there is no such thing as control. But I'm saying that. And why am I saying that? Such an outrageous thing? Is because fundamentally, what it is we're trying to do with the idea of control is actually determine what's going to happen to us, what's going to happen in our life, and keep away the difficult, frustrating situations, and get to the so-called wholesome, inspiring, pleasurable situations. Here again, nothing wrong with any of that. It's just that we're fooling ourselves if we think that is going to lead to happiness. That we can actually control ourselves into some kind of happy situation by just finding, if we can just find the right approach to take. Now, there are a lot of people, very intelligent people, very charismatic people out there who will be happy to take your money and train you, to sell you their technique. Tony Robbins is a good example, a very famous one. And not that he's wrong, I'm not saying that. He's a very charming fellow, and I'm sure that if you were to study under him and pay him the money, you probably wouldn't notice some positive results, shall we say. But what we're doing here is more fundamental, more basic, more radical, down right at the root of the situation. We're trying to see just what it is. We're not trying to do anything with it. Anytime you reach out to push something away, pull something to you, which is the two ways that we control. We try to get it into our territory so we can control it. Or we want, if we can't control it, then we want to get rid of it, destroy it. Warfare is the ultimate form of aggression. It's all over the place. It's just a complete assumption that the way to handle things is to fight with them. We don't accept that in our home, but isn't it interesting that it's completely accepted on the political stage, shall we say? Of course, the rationale is somewhat justifiable there because these people aren't in our living room where we could have a discussion with them. So there's something to be said for that, and I don't want to take anything away from that. I'm not here to evaluate that particularly. What I am saying, though, is meditation is a tool whereby, whether you're a Buddhist or not, whereby you can actually look at how you actually create problems for yourself. And if your immediate response in your mind is, well, I don't really create problems for myself. So there's plenty of people around me doing that. If I just need to learn how to accept them or be with them, because they're really the problem. Here again, not to say that people aren't problematic, they are. But the approach that's taken here is, in fact, there's a slogan from the 13th century. It teaches 7 points of mind training that says, drive all blames into one. Which is basically saying, you should take the blame. Kind of a highfalutin idea, isn't it? That you should actually take the blame for even for things that obviously are not your fault. So as meditators, what we're fundamentally doing here is just observing. The example I used here, I think maybe it was at AFR, the rehab place that I go in to teach a few times a week, is that you wouldn't open the hood of a car and it was not running right or had stalled and immediately start pulling wires and manipulating things and unscrewing things. And, first and this, of course, a pragmatic kind of idea, and it's just an image, and we use images so that we can communicate, so it isn't a perfect one, but if you think about it, you would first look at that and see what is going on there. You might even go and get a manual on that particular car, or you might just haul it into somebody else and have them do it. Like I said, the image only goes so far. But when we're talking about our own emotions, whatever you want to call it, we always give them names, don't we? Depression, anxiety, social anxiety, just lack of, just kind of a constant feeling of dis-ease, perhaps. Usually we wouldn't even gravitate towards meditation if everything is going well and we're feeling fine. Usually there's some kind of underlying, different for everyone, some kind of underlying feeling of not being clear about things, maybe. Wanting to have some more fundamental view of what does it really mean? What does it really fundamentally mean to be a living being? In a world of living beings that are, if you watch the news, we're pretty crazy. Pretty outlandish world out there, in here. So the idea is we're training ourselves by coming in here and sitting on a cushion. We are training ourselves to just observe what arises and falls in something that is very intimate to us. How this feels, how this looks, how it sounds, how it tastes, how it smells, and the quality of thought that arises and falls. Sitting in here for 20, 30 minutes, or at home once a week, will get you started, but it probably won't give you enough headway to really go into this with any depth. There again, everyone is different. Some people will make more, and I use this word, probably not in a common sense, but progress. Some people will make progress or be able to begin to see what is occurring. Not solve their problems, but to see what's actually happening here. What am I actually doing? Like looking under the hood of a car, what is actually happening? You know, to be pragmatic, you might say, is it a fuel problem or is it an electrical problem? Which would be the commit for internal combustion engine would be the two areas that you would start to sort it out. So in yourself, you might say, am I making this emotion I'm having, am I making this up? Or is this something that's coming from the outside to me that I need to somehow relate to in a sane way? So what's being suggested here is that through meditation practice, just as the Buddha did 2,500 years ago, we need to do it ourselves. Buddhism isn't something you just believe in Buddhism. Buddhism is something that you actually practice, you make your own. If you become a Buddhist or a student of Buddhism or a follower, you might say, of the Buddha or the Buddhist teachings, you do it yourself. It's not something where you believe things. Now sure, you look at the Four Noble Truths. Life is suffering, the cause is desire, the goal is cessation, and the path is Shila, Samadhi, and Prajna, discipline, meditation, and wisdom or knowledge. So we look at those. We look at the 12 links on the chain of existence. We look at the 6 realms. We look at the 3 marks of existence, the 5 skandhas, and all of the various other conceptual structures that help us look more closely at the mind, how the mind actually works in terms of delineating it using concepts. It's like looking at a cake and then going back and looking at the recipe. See, how did that, the cake is the cake. There's no concepts there at all. You eat the cake, you like it, you might not like it, you might be indifferent to it. So meditation practice is like a you might say it's kind of like a magnifying glass, that you're actually looking closely at your experience, or at what is occurring moment by moment, without, I like to say, without adding to it. Because if what happens, have you noticed, if you're sitting in a restaurant and you're talking to a few people there and enjoying yourself, and then someone says something that maybe that kind of rubs you the wrong way, you know, or you don't agree with, or that you take that causes some kind of reaction, rather than just look at the emotional reaction as it comes up, without ascribing or without pointing anything, without saying anything points to anything else, without making that person, without judging that person, or for that matter, without even judging yourself, like, I never can handle these feelings or whatever. But just observing. Emotion arises, and if you do nothing with an emotion, it can't last. Nothing lasts. That's one of the 3 marks of existence. The 3 marks of existence are suffering, everything is in a state of discontent on some level, not being complete. Everything is without a solid self or a separate being that comes from its own side. And every everything is impermanent. All compounded things will vanish eventually. So the interesting thing about suffering, or say you're having a conversation where someone is saying something that's very disagreeable to you, and you're feeling kind of a reaction to that, you're not sure what to do with it, you don't, maybe you're thinking, should I say something and say, you know, you can't, I don't care for what you're saying there, or would you be quiet, and that might be too, you know, don't I owe it to this person to be, you know, honest, you know, what are they thinking about? They're saying that, I'm not saying anything, what are they thinking about what I'm thinking about? You know how it goes? You're just a constant, like a merry-go-round of thoughts and opinions and ideas. And then when it's all over with, we still don't have any idea whether, should I have said that? We talk to our friend, well, you know what Joe said? He said this and this, and I feel like I should kind of, I don't know, put him in his place. Or maybe I shouldn't do that. Maybe I should tell him how I feel, you know. We go on and on and on. Rare, very rare to be in a situation where someone says something that goes right against you emotionally and maybe even hurts you. You do nothing with it. Nothing with it. You don't go to war over anything. If war comes this way and you go at it, this is called duality. This is called warfare. This is called suffering. So what are we suggesting here? Don't do anything. Just observe. The training, what's happening here, you may or may not have interesting experiences. You may see lights. You may feel like you're levitating. You may feel like your body's disappearing. In fact, if you sit here long enough, all those things will happen. I know. They all happen. Everything will come along to amuse you at some point. But what's fundamentally happening in this situation, from this point of view here, is we're slowly training the, you might say, the observer or the awareness or the witness quality of being a living being to just look and not meddle. Just what is this? What is this? Fundamentally, what is this living quality that arises in the morning, eats, sleeps, or eats, goes to the bathroom, goes to a job, it relates with people in terms of names, feelings, emotions, relationships, goes back to sleep, and that whole world vanishes at night. Vanishes. What is that? What is going on there? Meditation practice, slowly, we're training ourselves to just look and not jump the gun. Because when we're in the restaurant and we're having our talk with someone who says something that doesn't feel so good, the tendency is to want to do something, judge, or not do something, and then justify something behind that. Well, I can't really say anything. Conversation, passion, aggression, ignorance. Those are the three poisons in Buddhism. Passion, wanting to get it into your territory, control that passion. Aggression, wanting to get it out, get rid of it, destroy it, or point something out that something is incorrect. And ignorance, which is the third and the most difficult to really see. We can see passion. We can see aggression in ourselves. It's very difficult to see ignorance. Why? The very nature of ignorance is this. What problem? So ignorance is very, very difficult to even discuss. Pushing, pulling, ignoring. So maybe things will happen on the cushion, maybe they won't. Quite often it's said, no gaining idea on the cushion. When you sit on the cushion, if you feel like you're getting somewhere, you're not. Or if you are, then that won't last. Eventually you're just going to be on a cushion. You're just going to be somebody sitting on a cushion wondering why you're even meditating. That's progress. You get to the point where you're just sitting, you have no clue what this is even about. This is how awareness develops, and this is how awareness starts to expand without a self. As Trungpa Rinpoche said, one of my teachers said, Buddha Dharma without credentials. Buddha, awakened, Dharma, truth. Awakened truth without any proof. In other words, you see it. You can't take it to the bank, so to speak. You can't cash it in. You're not separate from it, so therefore it doesn't come to you in the form of information. It's called realization. You realize it, and then you, like the Buddha did 2,500 years ago, when he realized that he was not separate from anything, that all things were dependently arisen, dependent on everything else, and that nothing comes from its own side, and that he was awakened. He also realized that everyone was awakened also. They just don't know it. And then as he walked on the banks of the Ganges, as the story goes, who knows? I wasn't there. I don't think any of you guys were here. As the story goes, he wondered, should I even say anything? Would anybody even understand? And then, here again, the story, some of his former colleagues, spiritual seekers, noticed something a little different about him and came and asked him questions. And as they asked questions, he drew out of him responses to that. And he began his teaching career of 45 years, I think it was. So meditation practice, anything can happen on the cushion. It could be completely boring for months and years. It could be very interesting and exciting. Depends on your own particular wiring, your karma. The important thing is repetition. Continue to do it. Continue to sit. Continue to look at the wall, look at the floor. Sit. Observe. Observe. And then what will happen, and here again it's always different with different people, but your awareness that is being, you might say, developed or allowed to be there, because you can't develop awareness, it's already the case. If you just don't meddle, awareness is already shining everywhere. It doesn't belong to anybody. Consciousness doesn't really have an identity. It just looks like it does. So then that awareness starts to, you might say, seep into our everyday kitchen table affairs or at work, the awareness around the whole spacious quality around what people do. We notice that we might notice we're more attentive to listening to people when they're talking. We're less likely to be planning what we're going to say back to them. Even if the person is generally kind of a boring person who's always repeating the same stories over and over, instead of kind of shutting down on them and trying to figure out an excuse to get out of there, perhaps we're really interested in what some other deeper level is beginning to show up about awareness, about how is this person functioning this way? A person who you might say is maybe is just tied up all in knots about their story, about what life is about for them and what they're going to do and what they should do and what they shouldn't do and what their kids should do and what their wife said or their spouse said. And they need to buy this or get this or quit this job and do something else. Like they need to get, we all know we do some of this ourselves, and then we hear someone else just talking. And have you noticed if you sit and just look at somebody and look at them, some people are kind of astonished you're listening. They're so used to being ignored. And if you actually look at someone and you listen, sometimes they'll even stop because they might get a little self-conscious that someone's listening so closely to them. Really has an interest in what's happening with them. So that's where you might say the fruits of meditation shows up. The Dalai Lama, I think it was, that said, if you want to know how well your meditation practice is going, take a look at how kind you are to the people that give you problems. How kind and how understanding, how friendly, or how compassionate, you might say, to people that are difficult. Questions? So this is an exercise. Meditation is an exercise whereby you hold very still and you sharpen the blade of awareness. Later on, you'll go and chop all the vegetables of everyday life, this, thinking that, chopping this, chopping that. But when you're sitting, all of that we just put that off over on the shelf. We'll get to it later. And we just observe, just sharpen that. Just what is arising? What is arising? Just a white wall. What is arising? If negative thoughts, positive thoughts, neutral thoughts tend to arise with it, don't do anything about it. It's a tendency to say, oh, I'm thinking too much. No, you're not. We don't even know what thoughts are. So how could you be doing it too much? First find out. Find out what thoughts are, rather than just make an assumption about thoughts and step off a cliff or whatever. When I say step off a cliff, I'm saying just go into some kind of unknown situation where you think you have ideas about what's right, what's wrong, what's up, what's down. The way of saying that is give things the benefit of the doubt. A person that normally you're kind of reactive, oh, here comes Betty again. You know, it's going to be that same story about what's going on with her. Just, I'll listen, but it's painful to listen to because it's kind of the same old thing. Actually, if you actually listened, things might change. Why? Nothing is separate. It looks like there's separate beings everywhere. And it's not saying there isn't a separation. There's separations everywhere. Dan's going to go back to Lansing. Sheldon's going to go back to Coldwater. And I'm going to the moon. No, I think I'll stay here. But the idea there's separations and there's all kinds of things that substantiate, reify that separation. But the insight that's really powerful is to begin to see that nothing is fundamentally separated. It's like, I have to paraphrase, Nisargadatta Maharaj, the great Indian sage of the last century, who died in, 1981, I think it was. He wasn't a Buddhist, but he was a great teacher. Someone was talking to him about, they noticed that he seemed to be pretty happy all the time. And they wanted to be pretty happy all the time too, and wanted to know how to accomplish that. And he, in so many words, here again I have to paraphrase, he basically said, no matter what occurs, I'm happy. So whatever arises is it. The great Zen teacher, Chinese Zen master Huang Po said, and I have to paraphrase this too, but of course he said it in Chinese, but he said, that very material thing right in front of you, that's it. You want enlightenment? Be here. You want realization? Look anywhere else. But it's interesting if you kind of try to try that on. What does it feel like to, that can't mean that. I mean, that means that when I really feel like crap, that's it. I mean, that's supposed to make me happy? No. What's being said is you're not, if you try to separate yourself from anything, that's what creates suffering. That's called desire, wanting things to be different than they are. The second noble truth of the Buddha is craving, desire. Whatever is right now, if you want it to be different, you will suffer. And so we sit on a cushion, face the wall, and we watch our desire. One form of that, of course, is wanting to get up and go do something else. Go have, I sometimes, perhaps you've heard me refer to sitting practice as voluntary stress, because if you hold still and observe your mind, the things you've been able to avoid all day will start to come up into view. So you're volunteering to come and sit down and look at your mind rise and fall without doing anything about it. Or if you are doing something about it, you're not going to do anything about that. So there's no second thought. So you see, oh, I'm trying to manipulate, but you're not trying to stop the manipulation because control, more attempt to control. You can spend decades trying to control your mind. I know people. I have meditation students that have been doing that for decades. Nothing wrong with it. Go ahead and do it. But it's unnecessary to do. And it's usually done out of we just don't want to let go. We don't want to relax and just be. We're afraid we might miss something, which is saying what? We think we're separate from things. We think there's something to get. Any questions?
What if you fall asleep while you're practicing?
Great.
Just fall asleep.
Fall over. Yeah, no big deal. So very good question. The idea is some meditation teachers now teach differently. Some people try to teach, now you need to do this so you'll stay awake, and do this and do that. And there's lots of techniques for doing it. And you can do those, and those aren't wrong. I'm just saying my approach is fall asleep. Because if you're continuing to try to not fall asleep, then that's another, year after year of trying to figure out how not to fall asleep. It's just, it takes up your time as a project. Why? Even though it's hard, it's easier to do that than to wake up. Because to wake up can be frightening, because it means there is no centralized self anywhere. So I would say, when I'm saying this, you might fall over, but you'd only do it once. And then you'd actually find your center of gravity, you might say. You'd realize what it really means to sit here, fundamentally. And you realize it's not about controlling this, it's about just being here, fundamentally. My other word, you've heard me say this, I know you've heard me say this, is to trust yourself. Very, very hard to do, because we misunderstand that as, if I trust myself, I should believe everything I think, and trust myself. But in fact, it's probably the opposite. Don't believe anything you think, because it's probably bullshit. Or not.
How often should a person meditate at home?
I think it's different for everyone. If someone's asking me what I would recommend, I would say 1 hour a day. Maybe a couple hours a day if you have plenty of time. I think there's lots of recommendations. Right now there's a meditation student of mine from Traverse City. Helene is up in that front apartment upstairs. She's been there 5 days. She has 5 more days to go. She's meditating 8 hours a day. I just recommended it. She said, I think I'd like to do that. So.
What's the value in meditating in a group?
I think it's a little easier in a group, because there are other people. Meditation is a kind of a lonely process of holding very still and just watching your mind just generate thoughts and emotions and things over a period of time. And if you're in a group, other people are doing the same thing. It just seems to kind of reinforce it. Doesn't feel, if you're doing it totally alone, a lot harder to stay there. Your mind will eventually, you might say, come up with, well, I've meditated 2 hours or an hour and a half. I meditated twice yesterday, I'm not going to meditate today. But if there's a group and they meet at a certain time, then you make you might say a commitment to, like this Saturday, we're going to be sitting here all day from 9 in the morning till 9 at night. Not likely that you would do that on your own. But I come in here and do it. And why do I do it? I want people to come and do this. I've done a ton of this in the last 35, 40 years. I don't necessarily need to come in here and meditate. But of course, neither do you. I'm not sure if that answers your question.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And some people are very good at meditating by themselves. It's not a problem, they can meditate a lot. Other people seem to do better with a group, so I think it's always been easier for me to meditate with a group of people than meditating. It's nice to have company. As you're falling asleep, you look up and, my God, there's other people falling asleep too.
I'm struggling with kind of where it's control and where it's, you know, because like there's sometimes where like, yeah, you know, you're observing the emotion, you're accepting the emotion, but that's kind of a form of control too.
It is.
But is that good control or is that bad control?
Well, good, bad is, as long as we're in this situation of trying to find good and bad, then that's control. And so that's what, we don't want to not know what's good or bad. We feel like we need to do that. So based on what I'm hearing you say, I would say you're doing fine. Just continue to look at them. Continue to look at that. And less is better. You know, less of anything, just the awareness itself, just the open dimension of things where you kind of feel like you know less and less about things, but you're somehow present. You're just present. It's we so much believe in duality, and we think that there's that kind of thing going on. When we begin to see it's not true, then we begin to trust ourselves, and we don't really, we stop having plans. We don't have plans. We might have an intention. You know, you might say the intention to do this or that, but the intention is much more open, because then our intention would move with the territory, so to speak. Whereas a plan, when it runs into, well, we're not going to do it that, we're going to do this can't happen, then we feel like we got to make a new plan. So there's some kind of frustration based on trying to get somewhere, get something to work out right. Whereas,
So kind of, you could run into trouble with having the intention that this is your plan, and you have an expectation about it, and it doesn't work out that time the way you want it to, I suppose.
Whereas an intention might be a little bit more, you know, open-ended. You know, like, I have the intention to come here on Wednesday and do this. You know, it may, if nobody comes, I probably won't do it. Usually there's one or two people, surprisingly enough, I think I'm going to get a break, and I don't. Have the intention to create a space where people can come and practice. And not really too many plans around it. It kind of, things like that develop in an interesting kind of way when you're not trying to push and get something to come out a certain way, when you just watch it and let it develop. Like Sheldon's, Sheldon's a wood carver, so Sheldon is interested in carving the sign for Sokuzan for the front of the building. That's been sitting down there for months. I could carve it, but I'm not going to carve it. I want people in our community to carve it. So, sure enough, Sheldon bit. Now he's down there with Band-Aids around. You haven't cut yourself, so have you?
Very rarely.
Do you? Well, Chuck and I,
It's good I waited.
Chuck and I cut ourselves.
Chuck was better. My fingers used to be much longer.
Cool. But yeah, the idea of a little bit of planning is good. You can kind of feel when it's too much, when you've got some kind of vested interest and you're starting to worry about it. Then you're probably put too many apples in the basket or something. Anything, Katrina?
Do you have information that I could take with me?
You know, we've often thought of printing something out, but we don't make plans.
We have a
Actually, it's-
library.
Huh?
We have a library.
We have a library in the community room. You're welcome to check out any book.
Okay,
Yeah, go in there and look at, there's all kinds of books by the Dalai Lama. You're welcome to go in there and write a name down. It's honor system. We don't check up on you.
okay,
Take books with you, and people take them all the time.
okay.
And then people also donate books to keep that going. We have thought about making up a brochure that says what we're up to, but this hasn't happened. Chuck, Julia, you have any questions?
No, I know everything now.
Well, keep coming. Keep plugging away. So,
Yep.
Richard, anything about sitting practice, or since your first time?
I'm just trying to reconcile it in my mind.
Mm-hmm. How are you trying to reconcile it?
Just listening to what you said, and I'm missing the piece I normally have when I think about something is what do I want to accomplish with this?
Yes.
You
Well,
circumvented that question.
Well, I can help you. I mean, because there is a goal. The goal is of meditation is to end suffering. So, if you have some suffering, or if people around you have suffering, then that would be that is the goal. That was the Buddha's original intent, was to find the cause of suffering and end it. And he, if you study the Buddhist teachings, you'll see that that's what he was highly, highly focused on.
That's hence the glowing appearance.
Pardon me?
That's
Yes.
hence the glowing appearance of people that looked at him and said, well,
Yeah.
what have you been doing?
What have you been
Something's
doing?
good.
Thunderbolts coming out of his ears and stuff.
I guess I just don't, I've been listening, but I don't quite have the loop complete of everything you've said, but I'm sure that comes in time.
And it's, everyone makes it their own practice in some way. The meditation is very much like kind of, brushing your teeth. You get up in the morning and you just do it. You don't really analyze it too much. You just do that practice. Of course, it's a lot different than brushing your teeth, but it has a similar kind of quality that you don't necessarily analyze or try to evaluate your brushing your teeth. You just try to do a good, thorough job of it, and then you go on to the next thing. And meditation is very ordinary in that way, and it's just something we do. And so rather than being some kind of special thing that we're trying to get, call it a gaining idea, trying to get to some other state, that actually is suffering, trying to get from what is actually the case into something else. That tends to create more suffering.
I have a question. When you're sitting and meditating, you're not necessarily trying to think about anything. I know when I was sitting there, what if you feel like you're, I guess I want to say zone or something? You understand?
What's the question?
Hmm?
What is the question?
Like you feel like you're, I guess by me just looking, feel like in a zone or something.
Well, I think that'll arise, yeah. In fact, if you sit like this and hold still and just observe, just about everything you can imagine is going to arise. Over and over and over. And things will come, things will go. And the less you do with any of it, the more there's just this quality of just looking at it, just observing it. So a zone, an experience of being in a zone, an experience of being, having your body disappear, and there's all kinds of experiences. The thing that's interesting about an experience is they all disappear. They're memories. Any experience you have eventually goes. So just life is a collection of those experiences. But realization, to actually realize who you are, your identity, I mean, who you really are, not just a separate person that's trying to get ahead and trying to look good and trying to get people to respect them or appreciate them and notice them or not notice them for that matter. That goes, and you realize you're not separate from anything. It's not an experience. It doesn't, once you realize it, it doesn't go anywhere. It doesn't vanish. So whatever you experienced, like being in the zone, fine, that's fine. That may happen tomorrow, next week, and then it may go. You may think, what happened to that zone I used to get into? It's gonna go. Just like I used to fall asleep. Now I don't fall asleep anymore. Or now I fall asleep but I don't care if I'm asleep or if I'm not asleep. I fall asleep up here all the time, actually. I don't fall over. Why? I've done it for a long time.
Let's not snore either.
Yeah. I try not to snore.
And you're gonna hear that if I fall asleep.
Because I'm snoring. Any other comments or questions before we close?
I have one more question.
Yeah.
Before I started coming here, I haven't looked at a wall as much.
Yeah.
Mainly just kind of looked out at the floor.
Yes.
I found some benefit from looking at the wall, but sometimes it's like kind of an overload to my eyes. Should I keep
Yeah.
looking at it? Or
Trust yourself. Turn
Okay.
around.
all right.
You'll know what you might not have it in terms of language or a concept. The way you know that is you can't really talk about it. That's when you know you understand something, but you don't know how to convert it into concepts. You're actually trusting yourself, and then you know when you're turning around, you're gonna look out into the room. You're doing that because you need to do that. The wall. That's why I don't require, you might say, or even suggest that people, when walking meditation, unless you're new, I think you need to learn walking meditation so you know about it. But like with Chuck and Julia, they rarely do walking meditation. But they trust themselves. In fact, Julia's facing the wall and Chuck is facing out. And they've been meditating for, 25 years. Been meditating a long time. So it's, you know what you need to do. And you might occasionally have to check in or want to check in with somebody else, or you might not. So yeah, I would say whatever you think. My recommendation is face the wall. If somebody is not sure, then I'll help you face the wall. But if it gets like that, then maybe you should look out for a while, and then you'll kind of see why you're looking out.
Okay.
So you might find yourself turning right back around, because what you're really looking for, you might say, you're trying to understand, is actually with visual stimulation, but very little of it. Good question. Any other?
A question about trusting yourself.
Yes.
Does that mean that there's a true self and a false self? Your mind creates a false self